Hello Year 11 and welcome to your 5th GCSE Religious Studies revision video for Paper 1 Christian Practices. My name is Miss Smith and I'm one of the Religious Studies consultants for the Harris Federation. And I've created this video to help support you prepare for your exam. In order to do this, I will be using the revision checklist that you have available to you. You can find this checklist on Padlet, in Student Essentials, or you can ask your Religious Studies teacher and they will be able to provide one for you. This video is going to focus on the topic in Christian practices, the role of the church in the local community. On your checklist, you will see that you have to know the role of the church in the local community, including food banks and street pastors. It's really important that you know these two specific roles and know that they are only linked to the local community. We've created some columns for you to tick off whether you're confident that you know two ways of doing something and the importance of doing this thing, along with a quote about each of them. And the reason for this is because if you are able to do this, you'll be prepared for any 1, 4 or 6 mark question on the exam paper. Plus, you'll be giving yourself some great foundational knowledge to help approach those 12 mark questions. So all of our revision is going to be structured around this format to help you prepare the different styles of questions on the paper. So let's look in detail at one of the examples of the roles of the church in the local community that you need to know about, and that is street pastors, because you could get a specific question about this. So if we have a look at the definition of street pastors, we can see that they are trained Christian volunteers from local churches who patrol streets at night to offer care, listen and help vulnerable individuals. So how do they do this? We need to know 2 ways. I've got quite a few ways here. So they do help the homeless, so they might give them food or water or foil blankets. They will give out flip-flops for people on a night out who've removed their shoes, or they might need to connect people with emergency services if they need police or medical care. So why is helping the community important? Why is what street pastors do important? 1, it lives out the teachings of Jesus to help the hungry. Also, it shows God's love in a practical way, and we can link that to salvation by works, doing good things in order to achieve salvation. Now, obviously, there's no quotes about the street pastors in the Bible, so what we have to do is look for quotes that relate to why the street pastors do what they do. So the best one to use is going to be the parable of the sheep and the goats. You can also use love your neighbour, and you can also use faith without works is dead. But make sure that even if you don't know the exact quotes, that you do say that these things come from the Bible in order to get your mark. Okay, let's move on to the other role of Christians in the local community that you need to know about, and that's food banks. So food banks are places in local communities where people in need can collect food, often run by or supported by local churches or religious charities. So there's 2 ways that Christians will get involved with this. So 1 is buying extra food in their weekly shop and donating it to the food bank, or they might volunteer in the food bank to collect or deliver the food. So why is this important? Why is it important that Christians get involved in food banks in the local community? It lives out the teachings of Jesus to help the hungry, and it shows God's love is a practical way, and you can then link it to salvation by work. So again, you're using similar information for food banks and for street pastors. And we've got that lovely quote, "I was hungry and you gave me something to eat," which is just the perfect quote for food banks. Or you can use whatever you did for the least of one of these, you did for me, but making sure that you quote that these are from the Bible. If you can't remember these exact quotes, then you could just mention the parable of the sheep and the goats generally, but I just think this quote is just pretty perfect. Okay, let's have a look at some exam questions. Let's start with our 4 markers. So you know by now that you need to be able to explain 2 or similar or different ways in which Christians practice something. Okay, so how do they practice these roles in the local community? Or you might get a question that's specifically about street pastors or specifically about food banks. So I'm going to model a couple of these next, but actually it would be really great if you could practice some of these on your own in time conditions. So remember, for your 4-mark questions, you need to know a simple explanation and a development of that point, a second simple explanation and a development of that point. Okay. When you write your model answers, take them in for your teachers to have a look at. So let's have a look at this one. Explain 2 different roles of Christians in the local community. So one role is through Street Pastors, which is a Christian charity which helps vulnerable people on nights out in city centres. For example, they would give out flip-flops to people who are struggling to walk in their shoes. So we've got a simple explanation of the role of street pastors, and then we've got a development with an example of specifically what they do. A different role is through food banks, which are volunteer-run charities that collect food for those who are not able to buy food for themselves. People can either donate food or volunteer to collect and distribute food. And so what we've got there is a different role of Christians in the local community. We're talking about food banks, and we've got a simple explanation of what those are. And then what we've got is the different specific ways that Christians can get involved in that. Let's have a look at a similar question. So explain 2 similar roles of street pastors in the local community. And so we've got a specific question about street pastors rather than generally about helping in the local community. So one role is by giving out flip-flops to people who have had to remove their shoes on a night out. This is to protect people who may have had too much to drink from getting injured. A similar role is by locating emergency services to support people on a night out who may need medical help or the police. This is to put into practice Jesus' teaching about loving your neighbour. So we've got a simple explanation, a development, a second simple explanation, and a development. We haven't answered in full sentences. You don't need to do this to get 4 marks. And actually, I've developed that last point by linking it to Jesus' teaching. You don't need to have quotes in your 4 markers, but sometimes it's a really easy way to develop an answer if you can't think of how else to do it. Okay, in terms of 6-mark questions, these form a similar structure to your 4-mark question. So simple explanation, development, second simple explanation and development. But to get that crucial 5th mark, one of your developments needs to be a quote and a source. And to get your 6th mark, you then have to apply this quote to the question. On the slide are some potential questions. We're going to go through one of these so you can see what it might look like. But obviously you can have a go at the other 2 if you set yourself a 6-minute timer for these questions. So we're going to do explain 2 reasons why the role of food banks in the local community is important to Christians in Great Britain today. Refer to sacred writings or another source of authority in your answer. It's a very long question and there's quite a lot to it, but we're going to try and break it down so it makes sense. So we've got to give 2 reasons why the role of food banks are important. We've got to get our 5th mark in, so we get our quote with our source, and we need to get our 6th mark by applying it. Okay? They are important because they put into practice the teachings of Jesus, which is to help vulnerable people in Britain today. This is shown in the quote from the parable of the sheep and the goats from the Bible. I was hungry and you have given me something to eat. This quote tells Christians to feed people who are hungry, which is exactly what food banks do. So we've got a simple explanation. We've got our development. Our development is a quote with the source. So we get double marked, and then we have applied that quote to the question. So we'd get 4 marks for that first paragraph. They are also important because they put God's love into practice, because God's love is agape love, which is selfless love, and volunteering at a food bank to help vulnerable people is a selfless action. So you've got another simple explanation of why the role of food banks is so important, and then we've developed that to link that together. Okay, so that is your model 6-mark answer. Remember, if you forget to put that the quote is from the Bible, you will lose a mark for that, so it's really important to remember it. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a grounding of the role of Christians in the local community, as well as how to answer a 4- and 6-mark question on this topic. Take some time now, set a timer, have a go at some of those 4- and 6-mark questions that we haven't done. Take your answers into school for your teacher to mark, and good luck with your revision.